you're going to be operating.
Mr. Chairman, how do things go in there? How do things go in there? What did you learn, sir?
Very well.
Well, this briefing, while very extensive and long, posed far more questions than it ever answered. Their plan for the U.S. running Venezuela is vague, based on wishful thinking, and unsatisfying. I did not receive any assurances that we would not try to do the same thing in other countries. And in conclusion, when the United States engages in this kind of regime change and so-called nation building, it always ends up hurting the United States. I left the briefing feeling that it would again.
How much will it cost taxpayers, Senator Schumer?
Who did the briefing say is running Venezuela?
The U.S. military operation in Venezuela was a decisive and justified action. Nicolas Maduro is responsible for the deaths of untold thousands of Americans after years of trafficking illegal drugs and violent cartel members into our country. This is undisputed and everybody agrees with it. These are crimes for which he's been indicted in U.S. courts, and an arrest warrant was duly issued. And now he has learned what accountability looks like. Under President Trump, the United States will no longer allow criminal regimes to profit from wreaking havoc and destruction on our country. He's putting Americans first and succeeding where others have failed, and this is very clear.
Of the current regime to stay in power, for instance, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, or did they specify?
With regard to the war powers and the compliance with federal law, we are not at war. We do not have U.S. armed forces in Venezuela, and we are not occupying that country. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war, that is true. But it also vests the President of the United States with vast authorities as Commander-in-Chief. Under Article 2 of the Constitution, the President has the authority, as all presidents do, to deploy military forces to address threats to the U.S. and to enforce U.S. law. The War Powers Act states that notification should be made to Congress within 48 hours following the initiation of hostilities. As we've noted, and I've made many public comments, that happened almost instantaneously here. My first call was at 4 a.m. by Secretary of State Rubio. Despite the claims by some of my colleagues, under the War Powers Act, there is no requirement for prior congressional approval or prior notification. And in fact, in this case, the intelligence was so sensitive, the conditions had to be perfect. There was no predetermination of when exactly it would occur. Their oil exports, as you know, have been ceased, and I think that will bring the country to a new governance in very short order. So we don't expect troops on the ground. We don't expect direct involvement in any other way beyond just coercing the interim government to get that going. Look, I expect that there will be an election called in Venezuela. I mean, some of these things are still being determined, of course, but it should happen in short order, and I think it will need to be so that their economy can remain stabilized and the country can remain stabilized.
It is never a mistake to protect the American homeland. No matter what, this president, as he's done from the beginning, he is going to protect the American homeland, whatever that means. He's going to use his Article 2 authority. In this particular case, he's going to use law enforcement authority against a narco-terrorist drug dealer that has been inviting in all of our adversaries, China, Russia, Iran, to essentially use their waters as a fleet week for their countries and against the United States of America.